Bienvenidos to Pica Poco Kitchen. Today we're making conchas. Vámonos! When people ask me which food I miss the most, my answer normally depends on when they ask me, because when it comes to food, what I miss the most is having access to whatever, whenever. One of the hardest things for me to adjust was eating times, because you guys eat your big meal between 5 and 7. In Mexico, we have our big meal around 3 or 4. And in late evening, we have a supper or a snack, if you want to call it that. And that's where sweet, wonderful bread comes to mind. Sweet bread in Mexico is so accessible that you can have a bakery right in the corner of your street, or maybe you even have the luxury to have the baker going around your neighborhood, and you're just waiting to hear either the bell of the bicycle if they're carrying their breads in a basket, or the honk of the truck if they're driving around, or even the beautiful singing voice of the baker when he goes around pushing his cart yelling El pan! And then you go, run, get your chanclas, get your money, and go get the bread before somebody else gets there. So, yeah, when people ask me which food I miss the most, I normally go on a rant, and probably that's why people don't ask me questions anymore. Anyway, I'm gonna teach you how to make conchas so they are accessible to you as if you were living in Mexico City. Because we're gonna make a rich dough, before we put it together, we need to make a sponge, which will activate our yeast and get things going. So from the 350 grams of flour that I will use, I'm gonna take 2 tablespoons. From the 65 grams of sugar, I'm gonna take 1 tablespoon. Our full 7 grams of yeast. I'm using 7. You could go from 5 to 7. I'm using 7 because that's what the package, the small package, has. So most people are gonna use the package. So you can go ahead and put the whole package in. And for my milk, my tepid milk, I have 130. I'm gonna use less than the half. I'm gonna use 60 grams, 60 milliliters, sorry. This is gonna be a good indicator to see if your yeast is active. If it's still alive, you're gonna see a few bubbles already forming. I'm gonna let mine sit for around from 15 to 20 minutes until it becomes the actual sponge and then once it's nice and bubbly, we're gonna put everything together, right? Okay, so I had my 3 karaoke song concert, and now I'm back because my sponge is spongier than Bob himself. All right, let's put it together. We are going to start by making a well on the flour. In 6 grams of salt, the rest of my sugar, 2 beaten eggs, my sponge, some vanilla extract, and we're going to slowly incorporate it. I have the 70 mils of milk that I had left. I'll add them. Probably I'm gonna use it all. Depending on where you are, you might need more or less. So go little by little, and depending on how you see your dough coming together. And once you get to a consistency where you see your dough is mostly incorporated, we're gonna start doughing with our hands. Now, before I get my hands dirty, opposite of what Sting would say, I need you to come stand close to me. So I'm gonna move you closer so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now that my dough is mostly incorporated, I'm gonna move it to my table. As you can see, my dough looks much better. At this point, I'm going to transfer it to a bowl because before things get better, they're gonna get worse because I'm going to add the butter. The butter is gonna make the dough real wet, so it's gonna be difficult to work, but be patient and trust the process. We're adding 100 grams of unsalted butter. It's been left outside, and we're gonna do it little by little. Incorporate a piece and then continue adding the rest. Just fold it on itself and be prepared for frustration. At this point, all the butter has been incorporated in the dough, so I'm going to move it back to my table to continue foldings. So do not add any more flour and just fold it until it stops sticking to the table and hopefully to your hands as well. Once you get to the right point, you need to let it sit and relax. At that point, we're gonna cover it with a bowl, go watch an episode of The Office, read a chapter of your book, listen to one of your podcasts, and then come back. Both me and my dough are quite relaxed now. We're gonna proceed to our last session of foldings. Just a couple more before I shape and ball. At this point, I do need to add just a little bit of flour to my surface so it makes the doughing and the shaping a little bit easier. But as you can see, my dough is already way easier to manage. So I'm just doughing a little bit, keeping the seams at one side before flipping it and shaping it into a ball. And now we can transfer our dough to a bowl. I'm adding a little bit of oil so it doesn't get stuck to the walls. And I'm also going to cover the dough with some oil so it doesn't form a crust around it. We are going to let it sit for around 2 hours until it doubles in size. So go ahead and go watch an Avengers movie, except for Endgame or Infinity Wars because those are longer. Cover your bowl with some cling film and then come back and see it. Before I go watch my movie, we need to make the covers. For the covers, I'm gonna need 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of powdered sugar, just a little splash of vanilla, and 50 grams of butter. Amigas, this is Alice from a different universe. My mic died on me and I didn't realize until later. So, as you can see, I made a paste and I'm going to cover it in film and let it sit in the fridge while my dough rises. And I'm going to make another one, chocolate flavor. I have 35 grams of flour, 15 grams of cocoa powder, 50 grams of powdered sugar, and 50 grams of butter. Now, instead of butter, you could use lard or shortening, is up to you. I made another circle or disc with my dough, and I'm also going to cover it and let it sit in the fridge. And here she is, 2 hours later, double in size. So what I'm going to do is punch the air out of it and then make a pizza shape in my table so I can cut it in equal sizes. You could of course cut it and weight it, but this is the way I find it easier. So I make some sort of a pizza and cut it in quarters and then in eighths. I'm going to quickly shape my balls, just putting the seams side down and rolling it with my fingers lightly around it on the table. I'm going to put 4 in each tray, and I made 8, but you can make less or more depending on how big you like your balls to be. And here you have it one more time in regular speed so you can see what I do. Just seam side down. Once it's shaped into a ball, you're gonna roll it with your hand lightly around it on your table, and then seam side down on your pan it goes. I'm going to do something similar with the paste, both vanilla and chocolate. I'm cutting them in quarters and then I'm going to make balls so I can flatten them and use them as covers for my dough balls. And this is a method that I find the most convenient to make my discs. Using my tortilla press and some plastic, I lightly press my circles to make the discs. If you don't have a tortilla press, you could use a rolling pin to flatten all your paste and then use a cookie cutter to cut the circles, or You could make the balls and then the rolling pin to flatten them and create each one. Whichever method you use is going to be fine. Just remember to make your discs a little bit bigger than your balls because they need to rise a little bit more. And also make sure to have at least 2 millimeters of thickness. You're just gonna put them around it. You don't need to add anything else. They're gonna stick on their own. Here I'm going to show you how I score them. I'm using a blade, but you could use a sharpened knife or one of those stamps that they sell on Amazon to make the conchas. Now, something that blew my mind and I just recently learned is that the word conch in English actually means a seashell. It's a type of seashell, and I didn't know that, and I was amazed because conch doesn't even sound like a real word. So I make a pattern of diamonds, but you could do just straight lines or whatever shape you think looks more like a concha. Just remember to be careful and don't cut all the way through the dough. And here are my conchas after 1 hour of rising. And you can see that the dough has spreaded and created these patterns with the shell that we cut. So I made my vanilla, my chocolate, and here I'm showing you that I made a little heart for my husband. I have my oven ready at 350 Fahrenheit. I'm going to tuck them in and bake them for 15 minutes. And here you have them. Soft, sweet, and delicious. Here's the heart that I made for the hubby. If you're planning to make a heart, you can go deeper on the cut so it's actually more pronounced. And because in my timeline is not yet 4th of July, I made some Americana conchas. And I couldn't resist. I already cut one open. This one was for me. It's half and half chocolate, vanilla. But take a look at this. Come on. It's just so soft, so delicious. And these little pieces of the shell that fall off, oh, you save them for last. It's your last treat. Now you can eat them just as they are, or you can dip them in your hot cocoa or your milk, or if you're lactose intolerant like I am, in your coffee. But come on. And while the ally of that universe enjoys her concha, let me remind you to make them, share them with your friends just like this video, like, subscribe, and be notified. And for more, follow me on the socials. Adios, amigues.